we have to start with the Peach Bowl. That was the instant classic that we were anticipating, at least coming from one of these matchups this weekend. Ironically, maybe the game that the nation counted out the most, right? With Arizona State. And we told you on the preview show, mathematically, this did not favor Arizona State. There was not a single metric that you could point to and go, yeah, I think the Sun Devils have the edge here. Rushing attack, Texas's defense. Pass rush, Texas's defense. Aerial attack, Arizona State didn't have any wide receivers with more than 20 catches coming into this game. I mean, there was nothing that was going the way of the Sun Devils, and there was nothing going the way of the Sun Devils early. Texas jumps out to a big lead, and then here comes Sparky, and he claws his way back. Cam Skattebo, 42 yards passing and a touchdown, 143 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, 99 yards receiving. He gets the Peach Bowl MVP. If you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching it on the YouTube side, Cam Skattebo made the thumbnail, and I think we felt like there was no better place to start than an ode to Cam Skattebo for putting a team on his back and willing his team into double overtime against the Texas Longhorns, who, I mean, we can get into it, man. I really felt like they got outplayed by the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into a lot of different things about this game, but credit Arizona State for fighting back. It really looked like they were dead when Quinn Ewers ran that touchdown in. I think that made it 24-8. Time and time again in the first half and really halfway through the third quarter, they could not finish off drives. Really the same story as Boise State the night before them. They were getting into striking distance, couldn't finish off drives, and I know it was frustrating watching them. I know it was frustrating to their players and fans. We saw Cam Skattebo reacting very negatively on the sideline as well. To just, for some reason, people still thought that you could go right up the middle on the Texas defense. And then they eventually got more creative in the offensive play calling. It paid off in spades with that big 4th and 7, I think, touchdown pass from Cam Skattebo. Ended up being a bomb touchdown, and it was off to the races from there. But really, I think if you're a Texas fan, and obviously if you're new to the show, you see my banner in the background and you know that I'm not a Texas fan, and I'm going to come from this in a little biased take, but are you more breathing a sigh of relief or just extremely nervous about your next round matchup coming out of that? Obviously, you're going to celebrate a big victory in the quarterfinals. Moving on to the semifinals any way that you can is nothing to scoff at. But if I'm a Texas fan, everything that people have been saying about the holes in the resume, the holes in the roster, kind of came to fruition on New Year's Day. And it's very concerning for me from the outside looking in, going into a matchup against Ohio State next week. If you want to talk about just actual national title contenders.
Yeah, I think, boy, and next week is a reckoning for me in the Cotton Bowl, because you're going to have Ohio State, who's my preseason pick to win the national championship, taking on Texas, who I reversed course after the Michigan loss and said, I don't know if Ohio State has that dog in them. I think Texas might have that dog in them. Now, the one thing I came away from after the Arizona State game is wondering if Texas has the killer instinct to go beat an Ohio State, to then go beat Penn State, Notre Dame, whoever it is that they line up from across if they're able to get through the Cotton Bowl, because this game could have been over so early. This could have been over by halftime for the Longhorns if their offense would have just stepped on the jugular of Sam Leavitt, of Cam Skattebo, and completely taken a comeback off of the table. And instead, we saw play calling get conservative for Texas. We saw the defense start to have some holes that eventually the battering ram that is Cam Skattebo started to break against that fortress that Texas's front seven is. And for as much hell as Sam Leavitt was put through trying to dodge edge rushers, and man, that kid, I would love to see the GPS data from Sam Leavitt, because that man ran a marathon in the backfield trying to get away from Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill and all the edge rushers from the Longhorns. All of that, I mean, you watched at least the first half of the game, and it felt like Texas should be up 30-0. And yet they weren't.
Can I cut you off real quick, Mitch? Because
Sure.
I think I want to get your take on this. Is that more of a player limitation? Is it more of a play calling limitation from Steve Sarkisian? Because you're absolutely right on the step on your throat They don't seem to have that. They played with their food all season long.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Is it a player thing? Is it a scheme thing? Is it a play calling thing? Is it all the above?
I think I don't know that I could point to one thing in particular. I think in this game, it was their inability to run the football. You were texting us over and over through this game, like, Sark, why aren't you running the football? Texas ran for 53 yards. Quintavious Reisner, 18 carries for 45 yards. That's 2.5 yards per carry. And you look at that in the box score, and it would be very easy to go, well, duh, that's why they weren't running the ball. They weren't getting anywhere. But the opportunity for Texas to run the ball absolutely was there, and they just never committed to it. Those 18 carries from Trey Wisner, it felt like were sprinkled all throughout the game when Texas needed to bleed the clock and just could have iced the game late. They're throwing the ball. They're going with low percentage throws. They had a 4th down, Trey, where they threw a quick out route over the head of a corner in press man coverage. Like, I did feel like there were holes in the play calling against this Arizona State team. And eventually it felt like Texas had so many misses that Arizona State started to believe. And you heard the broadcast talk about it. Oh, momentum's a real thing in college football. Here come the Sun Devils. And slowly, not only was Arizona State starting to believe that they could win, Trey, they were the better football team. They were playing better football than the Texas Longhorns for almost the entirety of that second half. And, I know we sit here a day later and you look at the wreckage and go, yeah, okay, 39-31, Texas found a way to survive. But I am very concerned about the Longhorns going into the Cotton Bowl, especially given the Rose Bowl, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I mean, I don't know how you can be pumped if you're Texas about the matchup going forward, given what we saw against Arizona State.
We're excited it's in Dallas, and I think the excitement probably ends there. But yeah, the offense for Texas has been so perplexing all year. And I think part of me thinks that they're going to put Arch Manning in next year and just really be kicking themselves, thinking, what the heck were we doing this entire year? Because look, Quinn Ewers is a fine quarterback. He's not a national championship level quarterback. And they have a national championship level defense. They have a national championship level offensive line. They have playmakers of the receiver that are borderline national championship level. I hate to pin it all on one kid. You know that we don't like to do that on this show, but it's really hard not to. And at times this year, it seems like Sark has been wanting to prove the doubters wrong with Quinn Ewers almost. I know that's not what he's doing, so that don't come at me. Like, I know that that's not what he's doing, but the play calling almost seems like he wants to prove people wrong and let Quinn have his moment. And it's to the detriment of the team. They're coming out of the 2-minute timeout. Like you mentioned, Mitch, they need to bleed the clock. I know Brett Auburn missed 2 field goals down the stretch, but
brutal.
The reason Arizona State even had a chance at the end of regulation to take the lead and steal the game was because coming out of the 2-minute timeout, Sark called 3 passing plays in a row, and it was 2 incompletions and a Quinn Ewers scramble that Arizona State immediately called the timeout on. I think they burned like 10 seconds, 15 seconds off the clock coming out of the 2-minute timeout. And it gave Arizona State an opportunity. We can talk about the targeting no call here in just a second, but
yeah,
it was just mind boggling, man. And Arizona State, for their right, had a few what the heck are we doing moments too. I mentioned the running straight up the middle on 4th downs. The 4th down calls in the first half and the third quarter were just really questionable. And then the cover 0 blitz in overtime when they had him 4th and 13 was, man, just of all the times to make that call and for all the times for a safety to get lost in the moment, that they just picked the wrong time to do it. And it cost them the game ultimately. But it's a game that Texas had no business going to double overtime in, especially after the start that they got. But when you think about the offense as a whole, they got a punt return touchdown in the first quarter. They scored on 2 plays on their first drive. After those 2 plays, it was tough sledding the entire time. And it was largely because of miscues from the quarterback position and a lot of questionable play calling and not trying to establish the run.
Well, in Texas, after they scored on 2 plays, like you mentioned, 2 passing plays, congrats. Punt return touchdown from Silas Bolden. It looks like we're off to the races. Texas doesn't score again until what, 5 seconds left in the game? As far as they don't get back into the end zone. Yeah, no,
Right. Yeah. Next touchdown.
they kicked a field goal in the second quarter, but they don't get back into the end zone until the 4th and 13. And Kenny Dillingham.
Well, they scored. Quinn ran the touchdown in to give him 24 points, and that made it 24-8 at that point. I think that was midway through the 4th quarter.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. The 4th and 13's in overtime. You're right. The Dillingham was kind of kicking himself at the podium, and a lot of people were asking, okay, walk us through that coverage there, because it's 4th in the season, 4th in the semifinals, and you run a jailhouse blitz. And he said that Ewers checked at the line of scrimmage when they tipped their hand, the Sun Devils did, that they were coming, and the coaching staff just couldn't relay an audible of their own in time. My only thought with that is, okay, great. If you're going to bring 8, then why, it's going to 2. Everybody in the stadium knew that Quinn Ewers was going to throw it to Matthew Golden. So my thought is, if you're willing to go man on man, let's bring 7 and double 2. Put 2 guys over the top, 1 at the line of scrimmage. Let's jam him and put 1 over the top to prevent exactly what happened. Golden gets off the press, and the safety doesn't back up. He gets caught with his eyes in the backfield. Touchdown, Texas.
And there was a lot of confusion on that play because it looked like they wanted to bring 8, and then 3 guys kind of halfway rushed, so they didn't get home. And it was a 1-read pass. Quinn
that was the
1 read, and he hit the read, and the rest is history. But yeah, it was a crazy game. And as a neutral fan, I'm so glad we were blessed with that Peach Bowl. I was not expecting it to be. I got up in the middle. I needed to do some dishes. And when it was 24-8, I started doing some dishes and had the TV on loud. And thankfully, Joe Tess was very emphatic about calling the Sun Devils to come back. So
he was on one, man.
He was the perfect announcer for that game. If we can't have Gus Johnson, since it's an ESPN property, we got to have Joe Tess for a game like that. I'm so thankful.
I agree. So final score aside, a lot of the dialogue coming out of this game centers around the targeting call, or the no targeting call. Arizona State's driving to win the game. If they get this targeting call on 4th and 8 or something like that, it's a first down. They are well inside field goal range now. Arizona State, as the broadcast kept letting us know, an adventure in special teams. They were 4 of 12 coming in on field goals past 30 yards, so it was by no means a given. Now, their field goal kicker had hit 2 from 36 and 39, I want to say, or at least he did over the course of the game. So all of that aside, though, the dialogue from the game centered around, was the hit from Michael Taaffe targeting as it's written in the rule? And I'll set the stage with this. I was sent from multiple different parties the exact same rule saying, yes, it is targeting, here's why, and no, it's not targeting. And both parties highlighted the same part of the rule. So for me, in the moment, yeah, I thought it was targeting. I thought there was forcible contact to the head. I don't know if you could say he launched in slow motion. It didn't look like he launched. Live, it sure looked like he did. But what I kept coming back to is, we've seen that called targeting all year long. Just about every single time you get that kind of hit, it's called targeting. And so whether or not I actually believe it should have been flagged, I thought it was in the moment. My issue is we have no national standard for officiating. If you have very, very smart football people, brilliant football brains sending me the exact same underlined part of the rule saying, yes, it is targeting, and no, it's not targeting, we have a problem, Houston. And so for me, my whole takeaway was the fact that we don't have any sort of standard, any sort of oversight committee. Officials are not held accountable whatsoever. As I've mentioned all year long, with the money and the politics that have infiltrated college sports, that run college sports, we are rife for an absolute scandal that would break the sport. And there's another example of it where all of a sudden, if you have an official who's improperly motivated, you see how those calls very literally determine the outcome of a game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And before the Texas fans get really up in arms of us focusing on just that one call. That was the biggest call and the biggest moment of the game. But they're a laundry list of bad calls from that officiating crew. It was not a clinic on New Year's Day. So, I mean, you're absolutely right on the targeting, though. It's such an impactful call from it being 15 yards and an ejection that it has to be correct. And we have to have an actual standard. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, the big picture solution is getting rid of conference officials that prioritize different things and having nationalized officiating. But if we're going to make targeting such a big deal, every targeting review needs to go to the same person or 3 people. And they need to sit in a room all day that there's college football and say, yep, we're the targeting board. And it's 3 votes or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the end of the Dodgeball movie, maybe where it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But I don't know, because it's such a big part of our game and it's so inconsistently called that it just is going to drive everybody away from the sport. It's ruining football games. And the fact that we even have the opportunity to talk about how there might be nefarious motivations or that the wrong team might be moving on in this situation, the biggest weekend of the year up to this point, it's just ridiculous that we have so much money in this sport and we can't get this right.
Agreed. And to be clear, we're not saying that this Big Ten officiating crew had anything improper with the game. We're not even saying that the wrong team won this game and moved on. What we are saying is there is a problem. That is Exhibit A, Your Honor, of why there's a problem in this game. And it did very realistically impact Arizona State's ability to close that game out. I mean, those are just the facts, whether you like them or not. Texas obviously got it done. Arizona State had multiple opportunities to win that game after that targeting call or the no targeting call, and Texas found a way. So congratulations to Texas. I'm excited to break down the Longhorn-Ohio State matchup on our preview show. That'll be later this week. I do think it's going to be a good matchup. But as we roll maybe now into the Rose Bowl game.
Well, can I say one more thing on the targeting real quick?
Yeah.
The last thing is there were some brain dead people with big national accounts saying things like, it may be targeting, but you don't call targeting in that moment.
That was wild.
That is the most brain dead take. I've seen a lot of brain dead takes this season. We've talked about a lot of them on this podcast. That might be the most brain dead take I've seen this season or since we've started this podcast. If it's targeting, it's targeting. Doesn't matter if it's in the first quarter or if there's zeros on the clock and it gives an untimed down. Like we saw, what game was it? Was it the Michigan TCU playoff game where there were people talking that there should have been a targeting call at the end of that game on TCU?
Oh, sure.
Extended one more play. If it's targeting, then it's targeting, right? Like that is just the most asinine thing I've seen in the college football space in a long time.
Yeah, you're telling me that you would prefer subjectivity in the rule book. Like that makes actually no sense, less than 0 cents. Truly amazing what some people will stake their reputation to on the old Bird app.
Gracious, how about